An unobtrusive voice resonated in the room, and all was altered. What was to be a normal hearing turned into a reckoning for one forgotten people, and a reminder of what leadership looks like. If you've ever wondered whether one honest voice can still make a difference, this story is for you. Press play to take the plunge. One notebook came crashing down onto a highly polished desk, and in the still moment of its landing, the gravity of an abandoned neighborhood bearing down against the marble barriers of influence. What becomes of a community when their demands float directly to an unreturned voicemail? When does service become self-preservation? And who ultimately breaks the silence? Tonight we'll walk beside a weary mother, a determined principal, and a soft-spoken senator who still believes courage can sound like kindness. Together we'll ask, can honesty mend crumbling classrooms? Can one clear voice carry the hopes of thousands? Sit back, friend. The tale that follows is not one of spectacle, it's one of people. People who refuse to abandon the promise that every voice, including yours, still counts. Now let me go inside that room and let you see what went on next. Kennedy did not yell. He did not gesture wildly or pound the table. But somehow, every sentence he uttered hit like a judge's gavel. I don't know what you imagine a thug is, ma'am, he spoke quietly, his eyes holding hers. But I can tell you that it's not someone who's trying to shed light on individuals like Carla, individuals who've been overlooked by the very people they trusted to assist them. He paused for an instant before going on, voice still level but each syllable edged. You've been here in Congress for more than 30 years, Congresswoman, and your district has some of the highest rates of poverty in the nation. Folks are living in homes with no heat, no clean water, and here you are name-calling? He shook his head slowly. Perhaps it's time that we begin to discuss who is actually disappointing the people. There was a low murmur from the room, a surprise roused perhaps even inspired. From somewhere behind Representative Waters, a youth aide stumbled and let a pile of papers drop. The sound of them clattering was like an exclamation mark after Kennedy's sentence. Waters' hands gripped the edge of her desk. Her voice was hard-edged, but without its normal bite. Senator, this is a hearing, not a soapbox. The chairman held up a hand, a look of calm but determination on his face. Let him speak. Kennedy nodded slightly and continued. I'm not here to grandstand, Congresswoman. I'm here because I believe in accountability, and I believe the people in your district deserve to know why their voices are being ignored, why their schools are crumbling, why their neighborhoods are decaying, while their representative sits in Washington pointing fingers at everyone but herself. He slipped Carla Jones's letter back into a folder and produced another document, bulkier, filled with charts and statistics. This is a complaint from a local neighborhood association in your district, he told him, his voice calm but firm. It documents the fact that during the past half-decade, millions of dollars in federal grants intended for housing rehabilitation and job training never benefited the people they were intended to help. Instead, those funds benefited organizations with close relationships to individuals close to your office. He stopped, allowing the room to absorb what he said. Now, I'm not saying you did anything illegal, ma'am, but I am saying it doesn't look good. And when citizens like Carla Jones are left with a leaky roof and no prospect, it's our duty to wonder why. The room was buzzing now, journalists whispering into phones, aides scribbling notes, lawmakers shifting in their seats. Waters sat stiffly, her expression tight, lips pressed into a hard line. She opened her mouth to reply, but Kennedy held up a hand, not rude but firm. I'm not finished yet, he said quietly, but with an edge that turned the room still again. I'd like to share with you the story of a man, Marcus Tate. He's a two-time father, resides in South LA, within your own district. He was laid off during the pandemic and had applied to one of those job training initiatives your office administers. Waited months, no response. And then when he did follow up, he was informed the program had been canceled. When they bus? Because the money had been reallocated. His tone fell, weighty now. So where did that money go, Congresswoman? Because it sure didn't go to Marcus. He's working 2 jobs now out there just to put food on the table for his kids. Each word that came from Kennedy's lips built on the previous, like a slow burning fire. The image he created of neglect, of shattered trust, was one from which one couldn't turn away. The cameras recorded it all, zoomed in on Waters while she struggled to maintain her poise. In the rear of the gallery, a young woman brushed away tears with a wadded tissue. Her hands trembled. She represented Waters' district, one of the numerous who'd come all the way to D.C., hoping to be heard at last. Kennedy didn't notice her, but somehow he was talking to her, to Carla, to Marcus, to all individuals who'd been promised assistance and delivered silence. "Ma'am," he spoke softly now, his tone softer but just as firm. "I don't believe I'm a thug. I believe I'm just a man who's weary of observing decent people get left behind." He looked about the room. "And I think the people in your district, they're weary too. Weary of broken promises, weary of politicians who are more interested in holding on to office than in working for the constituents who elected them." He gazed over at Waters. "You called me a thug. But I'm not the one walking away from people who are hurting," Kennedy said, voice still even. "I'm here representing them because someone has to." Silence fell once more, as heavy as morning mist. Representative Waters leaned forward over her microphone, straining to smile. "Senator, political theater is what this is," she replied, her voice shaking slightly. "You are using these examples to attack me. You have no idea what goes on in my district." Kennedy didn't flinch. He leaned forward, eyes boring into hers. "Then tell me, Congresswoman," he said, his voice low and even. "Tell me why Carla Jones never received a follow-up call. Tell me why Marcus Tate's children go to bed without an evening meal. Tell me why your constituents are still waiting on the assistance that you vowed them decades ago." Waters opened her mouth, but no words came out. The whole room held its breath. Far in the back, a reporter whispered, "He's got her." Another's phone buzzed with a breaking news alert. Kennedy confronts Waters in explosive hearing. The chairman, sensing the tension, banged the gavel. "We'll take a brief recess." Chaos erupted, lawmakers huddling, aides whispering, journalists sprinting to file their stories. Kennedy stayed seated, hands folded, face calm yet determined. The hearing wasn't over, and he knew it. In the gallery, the young woman who'd been crying spoke to a friend. "I've never seen anyone stand up for us like that," she said, her voice shaking. Outside, video clips of Kennedy's words dominated social media. A YouTube live stream reached thousands of viewers. Messages poured in. "Kennedy just spoke for all of us, forgotten Americans." Waters didn't expect that. Leaders who care are why we need them. In a tiny South LA community center, people congregated around a laptop. When Kennedy said the words Carla Jones, a woman let out a gasp. "That's my neighbor," and her eyes welled up with tears. In the room once more, Kennedy shuffled through his folder. His hands were calm, but the stories he bore burdened him. He hadn't arrived to shame others, just to interrupt the quiet about others' pain. He knew that this was only the beginning, that discovering the whole truth would require more than one hearing. But today he'd spoken up for those who were voiceless and made Representative Waters reconsider her words. Not out of fury, but using them. Undeniable facts. Recess was over. As legislators trickled back in, Kennedy shut his folder and took a deep breath, prepared for round two. Whatever Waters had to say next, he wasn't going to be quieted. He came for the people. The chairman brought the room to order. Cameras zoomed in to capture the moment that would make the day. Senator John Kennedy, who had just been called a thug hours before, was to demonstrate what it really means to stand for something greater than oneself. The room hummed with agitated tension. Legislators slid into their places, their faces a mix of curiosity and unease. Reporters, now shoulder to shoulder along the walls, focused their cameras on the witness stand, where Senator John Kennedy sat unruffled as usual, hands folded over a neat stack of folders, each folder a subtle threat that he had yet more to share. Across from her, Representative Maxine Waters sat down. The earlier smirk had disappeared, replaced by a wary frown. She did not look at Kennedy, as if she felt the ground beneath her feet giving way. The chairman slammed his gavel on the table, and the room became silent. Every ear strained for what was to follow. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," Kennedy started, his Louisiana accent cutting through the silence. "Earlier today, I spoke to you about Carla Jones, a mother in Congresswoman Waters' district left on her own. But Carla doesn't stand alone. There are thousands of other Carlas, and it's time we discuss why. He unfolded a folder, removing a thick report with yellow tabs scattered throughout. This is a public document, although it's been mighty neglected, he stated, raising it to the cameras. It reveals how more than $10 million in community development grants for South LA fell into the hands of organizations affiliated with people close to Congresswoman Waters' office. Not in schools, clinics, or family homes, just organizations with gaudy letterheads that conduct hollow workshops. Shock rumbled through the room. Waters' hands were clenched on the desk, knuckles white, as Kennedy kept pushing. Steady, unyielding. Let's discuss Lincoln Elementary, he went on. That school is in your district. Children study there with broken windows and no heat during winter. 3 years ago, Principal Evelyn Carter requested a grant, funds your office has jurisdiction over, to repair the building and purchase new books. The grant never materialized. Instead, the cash went to a nonprofit run by a friend of your campaign manager. In 2 years, that group held one job fair. Meanwhile, Lincoln's kids are still reading textbooks from the 90s. In the gallery, South LA teachers gasped, anger and grief plain on their faces. Waters tried to cut in, voice shaky. Senator, you're cherry-picking stories. My office fights tirelessly for my constituents. Kennedy tilted his head, almost sympathetic. Then why is Ms. Carter still waiting, ma'am? If you're fighting, who's winning? The question hung unanswered. The chairman's hand went up for quiet, but Kennedy was already turning the page. He held up another document, a stack of printed emails. Here are some emails that reveal your administration directing a housing repair fund to a firm by the name of Bright Futures LLC. Sounds optimistic, doesn't it? One problem. Bright Futures belongs to a cousin of one of your closest aides. They received $3 million to repair homes in Watts. Know how many they completed? Seven. 7 homes, while families continue to live in mold and leaking pipes. Gasp filled the room. A reporter even dropped her phone with a clatter. Waters looked pale. She opened her mouth, but Kennedy raised a hand, polite yet firm. I'm not done, ma'am. Folks deserve to hear this. He turned to the gallery. Last week, Reverend Thomas Green called me. Runs a little church in Compton, your district. He's tried for 2 years to fund a youth center to keep kids off the streets. Wrote your office 10 times. No reply. But he did find out that a community grant went to a consulting company affiliated with your business family. That company was paid to research youth programs. No center constructed, no children assisted, but the company earned a nice profit. His tone became softer, with a quiet moral indignation. Reverend Green doesn't want a mansion, ma'am. He wants a means to save his children. Why didn't you respond to him? The gallery could no longer remain silent. A man in a frayed jacket leapt to his feet, voice breaking. That's my pastor. The chairman's gavel came down, but emotion poured over. Waters' voice climbed, quavering and high-pitched. This is a smear campaign. You're distorting the truth to attack me. Kennedy shook his head, nearly sorrowful. This is not about you, Congresswoman. This is about the people you took an oath to serve, and they're weary of being twisted. Just then, the doors of the chamber opened. A woman in her 50s entered, flanked by an aide. Lines on her face betrayed her exhaustion, but her eyes sparkled with determination. Kennedy smiled at her kindly. This is Ms. Lorraine Hayes, he indicated. She worked for your office, Congresswoman. She's here to testify. The room fell silent when Lorraine made her way to the microphone, hands shaking but voice steady. I worked for Representative Waters for 3 years. Lorraine approached the mic, hands trembling but voice firm. I worked for Representative Waters for 3 years, she started. I saw constituent calls go unanswered. Housing and school complaints were left on a voicemail that no one ever checked. I was told to prioritize donors, never the people. She swallowed hard. I left because I couldn't handle that anymore. The chamber gasped, whispers crackling like sparks. Cameras zoomed from Lorraine's tear-streaked face to Waters, arms stiff at her desk, fingers sinking into the wood. I believed in you, Congresswoman, Lorraine said, voice shattering. I thought we were doing good. But we weren't. We were doing well. She backed away, tears running, and silence fell like a heavy blanket. Kennedy nodded to her with quiet respect. Thank you, Ms. Hayes. That took courage. Waters tried to speak, her voice trembling. This is outrageous. She's lying, and you're exploiting her for your own agenda. The words fell flat. Even her own aides looked uneasy. Kennedy opened a second folder. These are signed affidavits from 3 additional former staff, he said quietly. They say the same thing. Your office ceased listening long ago. You can call them liars, ma'am, but the truth doesn't bend that way. The hearing got away from Waters, and everyone knew it. Outside, it went viral. Footage of Kennedy and Lorraine traveled swiftly on social media, garnering millions of views. At a church basement in South LA, neighbors saw it on a borrowed projector. When Lorraine testified, one woman stood up, trembling voice. That's what happened to me. I called about my son's school. They never called back. Heads nodded and soft sobs erupted as years of disregard poured out. Back in the committee room, Kennedy leaned forward, voice soft, verging on an appeal. Congresswoman, I do not like this. I do not wish to read these truths aloud. But when people like Reverend Green, Ms. Hayes, and so many others are weeping for help, someone must say something. You had the opportunity to be their voice, ma'am. Why didn't you? Waters remained silent, her eyes welled with tears, hands shaking on the table. The chairman cleared his throat. Senator, anything else? Kennedy closed his folder. Just one thing, this isn't the end. People deserve answers, and they'll keep asking till they get them. He collected his papers. The gallery erupted in subdued applause, not for him, but for the truth revealed. Waters departed hastily, aides following, faces somber. Reporters clustered outside, but Kennedy pressed on, his strides unbroken, heart weighed down with the tales he bore. In South LA, churches and community centers overflowed, not with rage, but with newfound resolve. The truth was out, and citizens were prepared to be heard. When the hearing opened for its final day, the atmosphere was different. Thickness, like the quiet after a storm. Spectators filled the seats. Hope and anxiety blended on each face. Additional cameras blocked the walls, all fixed on Senator Kennedy. He carried only a narrow black notebook this time. Representative Waters appeared slowly, shoulders stooped, eyes down. The blaze she had ignited on day one had smoldered out. The chairman's gavel came down. Quiet. Kennedy crept in over the mic, his drawl warm but firm. Mr. Chairman, thank you for allowing me to finish. We spent the last couple of days discussing tough realities about individuals within Congresswoman Waters' community who've been disappointed about malfunctioning systems. Today, I don't want to merely point fingers. I want to speak of what comes next. Because the people watching, people who've been harmed, they don't require more blame. They need hope. He surveyed the gallery, educators, ministers, community organizers, and South LA residents. A small boy held a creased notebook, wide-eyed. I keep thinking about Miss Eleanor, Kennedy explained, his voice infused with emotion. She's 82, resides outside Baton Rouge, was a school cook, raised 3 children by herself. She told me once, John, you don't have to be perfect to do right. You just have to care enough to try to. That stuck with me, because what this hearing isn't about is tearing someone apart. It's about caring enough to try for something better. He opened his notebook, handwritten stories on pages. These letters are from people everywhere, from Shreveport, Chicago, Mobile, people neglected by their politicians. They're not looking for the moon, just a fair deal. The room was silent. Waters sat still, hands clenched in her lap. Kennedy's voice grew blunt. Congresswoman, I don't believe you meant to hurt anyone, the congressman told her, finally looking contritely into her eyes that day. I think you began with good intentions. But at some point, power intervened. When people keep telling you just how important you are, it's easy to lose track of whom you're meant to serve. Power's not a crown. It's a responsibility, Kennedy declared. A gentle wave of nodding and murmurs swept through the hall. A third-row community organizer wiped away tears, lips quivering. Kennedy's tone softened. It's not just one district or one individual. It's all of us, every elected official, every citizen. When we hold leaders accountable, when money goes missing or promises are broken, people like Miss Eleanor, Carla Jones, and that little boy over there get hurt. He gestured in the direction of the boy in the gallery. The boy looked up, a startled look on his face, then smiled shyly. Cameras panned in and social media erupted with the picture. A photo of the future Kennedy desired to safeguard. Shutting his notebook, Kennedy faced Waters, his voice barely above a whisper. "Ma'am, I have no hate in my heart against you. I think you can still do justice to your people. But it begins with listening, actually listening, to the people who have knocked on your door for decades." Silence came. Waters blinked repeatedly, hands shaking, but remained silent. The chairman cleared his throat. "Senator, any last proof?" Kennedy slid out a single sheet. "This petition is signed by over 2,000 residents of Congresswoman Waters' district. They're asking for an independent review of how their community funds have been spent. I'm entering it into the record, not to shame anyone, but to give those folks a voice." Quiet applause rose, respectful and steady. Some lawmakers exchanged nods. Even a few on Waters' side looked thoughtful. "This petition isn't an end," Kennedy said, his tone hopeful. "It's a beginning, a promise that every dollar and every promise reaches the people it's meant for. And it's a reminder that the folks watching have power. They can vote, speak, and demand change, and we'd better listen." He hesitated, then breathed. "I want to tell you about Aisha. She's 13 and resides in South LA. Following the first day of this hearing, she wrote me an email on her school computer. She spoke of her mom working 2 jobs but still being unable to afford a safe apartment. Aisha closed her message with, "I want to believe things can get better, but I don't know if anyone cares." Kennedy's voice trembled a little. "Well, Aisha, I do care, and I know there are millions of others who do too. This hearing is not only about what's wrong, it's about what we can make right together. To Aisha and every child watching, don't lose heart. Your voice counts, and when you speak, we'll listen." The room remained quiet, the words hanging like new snow. Waters sat unmoving, eyes shining, fists balled. The chairman spoke, his voice thick. "Senator, you've given us much to consider. This hearing is adjourned." The gavel fell. Applause swelled, deep and heartfelt. Kennedy gathered his notebook. As he stepped away, the young boy hurried forward with a battered notebook. Kennedy knelt, signed it with a smile, and whispered something that made the boy beam. Cameras flashed, capturing a moment that would soon go viral. Outside the chamber, South LA residents packed churches and community centers, not to protest but to mobilize. They staged town halls, wrote petitions, demanded answers. A pastor in Compton ran Kennedy's last words on repeat, explaining to his congregation, he fought with truth. On social media, Aisha's letter went viral. "Listen," to Aisha trended on platforms. Even Waters' staunchest defenders remained silent, calling for more transparency, while Waters' office phones went unanswered. Back in the Capitol, Kennedy passed by interns watching a replay of the hearing on a computer. One murmured, "I didn't know politics could feel like this." Kennedy continued on to his office, where a pile of fresh letters awaited. The initial one was from a South LA teacher. "Thank you for seeing us. We're ready to keep going." Kennedy smiled, exhausted but real. This was not an ending, it was a beginning, a rallying cry for every citizen to demand accountability from leaders, to insist on truth, to create a better future. Because as he discovered, power without accountability produces neglect, but courage and honesty lead to change. And in Watts's community centers to Baton Rouge's, he had his say, "Don't give up, your voice matters." America briefly was more alert and receptive to hearing.